All right. Hi, I'm Nathan King with Horizon Equipment, and today we're going to do a quick walk around on an R4038 sprayer with exact apply spraying system on it. First, we're going to talk about the front load feature that this machine has. As you can see here, there's the control button, and it is actually 3 positions. The down is off. If you switch it to the middle, which you'll hear a click and it'll stay, that will open the sump and that will allow you to push product on from a tender truck or trailer. If you were to take it to the top spring detent, you'll see that you'll hear a click and it'll return to middle. That is actually going to do a couple of things. The sump is already open, but it will turn the pump on. It will take the engine to high idle, and it will allow you to pull product onto the machine from a tender truck. A couple of things about this system: it will, at 75% full, take the engine RPM down to 75%, and then when the machine is completely full at 100%, it will actually take the machine engine back down to idle, and it will turn the pump off. And at that time, you can switch this back to off, which will close the sump. If you'll come around here, just want to point out a couple things. This hose goes from the front fill all the way back to the bottom of the tank, and that sump valve is at the bottom of the tank. So a couple things to remember: if you're pushing on a hot product, anything other than just water, when you're done, you're going to want to run some tender truck clean water through that hose and flush that system out, because there's no way to do that with a system rinse on the machine. We're on the left side of the machine. This is the battery box. And since this is an exact apply machine, I do want to point out a fuse panel that's located underneath the catwalk right behind the battery box. This is your exact apply fuse panel, and it's got fuses and relays in there. If I open it up, you can see there has been a known issue of these fuses and relays vibrating out over time. In some cases, we've heard that you'll actually open that door and the fuse and the relay will be laying inside the cover. If that happens, John Deere is suggesting replacing the whole fuse panel rather than just the fuse, and that is a part number AKK 20343, and it's available through parts. All right, going to talk about a couple of maintenance items. We all know that you need to grease your machine every day, but one point that I want to specifically touch on is the kingpins. Those things are doing a lot of work and take a lot of abuse through the day and through the season. So just wanted to bring your attention to make sure these kingpins get plenty of grease. As we walk down the side, we can see that this machine is equipped with an eductor, and it is equipped with the automatic solution control for loading, and there's items that you can run system-wise from the ground here. If we back up, if you can see the hydraulic tank, there's a sight gauge up there. Very important that we don't overfill that sight gauge. There's a sticker on there, and we only want about 1 inch of oil showing in that sight gauge hose when the system is cold. And if we overfill that, when the system heats up and pressurizes, we can actually see the oil blow out of the cap on the machine. So just another little tidbit to keep in mind. While we're here, I'm going to talk about high flow versus standard flow. This machine is equipped with the 2 flow meters for high flow control. As you can see, currently we are set on standard because this flow for the second flow meter is shut off. If customers have any questions on that, it does say on the side when you should switch from standard to high flow. It is in gallons per minute on the side though, which has caused some confusion over the years, or as customers have called me. Couple of things: rule of thumb, 30 gallons per acre and above, we're going to run the high flow. 30 gallons or below, we're going to run standard flow. If a customer has a question about how their speed's going to impact that or where they need to have that set, there's a really nice tutorial on the display. If you go into the system page where it says standard or high flow, if you push that, it will allow you to put your speed in and your application rate per acre, and it will tell you not only whether you should be standard or high flow, but it will actually show you how you need to have these valves configured on the machine. Behind is our orifice valve. Again, been some questions around that. I know people in previous machines that run the conventional systems have run that orifice open a little bit just to help them maintain the right pressure and get the performance they want out of it. Being told we can leave that alone. You either have that open or closed depending on what the display recommends, but don't have to mess with that quite as much as we have in the past. As we move back, want to draw some attention to our hinge points. These pins do have bushings in them and they're non-greasable, but keep in mind that these things are going in and out, carrying a lot of weight as we're going through the field. Keep an eye on them because this is cast material in here. They're saying roughly between 1,000 and 1,500 hours of normal use. We might want to replace these, but just keep an eye on them so if they do start to wear, they don't eat into the cast housing of the boom. Now we're back behind the boom. Just wanted to point out a few things. And earlier in the presentation, we talked about how to disassemble and reassemble the ExactApply nozzle. But very important back here, these are little circuit boards, and they do have coils, cartridges, and poppet valves inside. So very important to run a boom flush. And if you do take one of these apart, use John Deere dielectric contact cleaner to clean these connections out, and then put a little bit of dielectrical grease back in when you put it back together. That'll help keep moisture and dirt out of the connection. Talking specifically about this portion of the boom, like I mentioned, there's moving parts in here, and when we're spraying chemical, depending on the product we're spraying, we can have some residue buildup in there. Specifically in these end cap aspirators here. These are in the system. They're designed to take the air out of the solution as it's flowing through the boom, and that helps us get a better pattern and make sure we're getting the application rate that we desire, along with coverage. But like I said, when air is escaping, it can carry some of that product through here. Very important, especially with ExactApply machines, to do a daily boom rinse. Keep in mind, this is a 120-foot boom, and so this boom will hold 40 gallons of solution. Average spray rate's 15 gallons to the acre, so that's telling me about 2.6 acres worth of product are going to be stored in these booms. So think of that two ways. We flush this machine out at the end of the day. The next day we come out, we go to spray. We could have just potentially clean water for the first 2.5 acres that we spray. So it's good to do a couple of things. We rinse this boom out. You can do that through the display. We can do a boom rinse, and it's all automatic. I would caution though, don't let it run until the tank is empty, because it will allow you to do that. You just abort the boom rinse with hitting the master apply button. You'll see on the back of the solution tank is the black freshwater tank. That's rated at 120 gallons. Really only holds about 110 though. So again, if we're going to do potentially multiple boom flushes, make sure you do just enough to feel confident that we've got that product rinse out of the boom. You can do an air purge then when you're finished, and we can push all that water out of the boom with air. When you do that, recommend only having 3 sections open at a time so the air system can keep up. And then also recommend working from the inside out, doing the outer sections last. As we move into the center of the machine, I want to talk about BoomTrack Pro. In the cab video, we mentioned that you want to always run that on hilly mode. And we do know anytime you're going to weld on a machine, we want to disconnect the ground cable from the battery to protect all the computer and circuit boards on the system. Specifically welding on the boom, they say it's a good idea to go and unplug every BoomTrack Pro sensor that you have on the system just to protect that circuit board and that component from shock. Now we're in the cab of the R4038 sprayer. Wanted to point out a couple of things about the operator station. Recently taken a 4000 series ops and adjust class. I was informed to run this machine similar to how you'd run an IBT machine. So you want to run the hydro handle all the way forward and then use your scroll wheel to adjust your speed, which is located on the front of the hydro handle. By doing this, you're going to run the system in its most efficient way, the way it was designed to be run, versus running it partially back versus all the way forward. Okay, when it comes to the multifunction handle here, there's a lot of buttons and tools available to be configured in just about any way you can imagine. A couple of things I wanted to mention though. From the factory, your fence row nozzles will be assigned to these buttons up here. Go ahead and remove those, because I've heard in the past that people have actually hit that button by mistake and they don't realize that they've got their fence row nozzle on until they've been spraying for a while. Also on these buttons up here, use the top two as your page scrolls. You can also set, this machine I believe is set up to use the forward button as the X. Now, as you see on the screen, I'm trying to use it and it's telling me that the assignments are not ready. There is a lock button located right here that illuminates every time you cycle the key. So we have to press and hold that, and that actually will bring this up, show us that they're turned on. And as you can see here, these buttons here that I was referencing before, we've got our page buttons, and then we've also got our back button. So I can X out of the messages that come up, or I can scroll through the display pages. We have an HMS button on the multifunction handle. That's our headland management system. You can set that up for returning to field speed, turning boom track on, and also auto track. You can have all three of those, or you can have one of those, whatever you like. Most people are hitting it for auto track and then boom track pro, and then they're hitting their master apply button themselves and then setting their field speed on their own. When it comes to boom track pro, always run that in hilly mode. You can get into there by going into your menu, and then we'll go to our boom and nozzles, and then hit the setup button under boom and nozzles, and you can see here that we have boom track pro turned on. And for terrain type, that's what I was referencing with hilly mode. In our area, that's what we want to run it on all the time. Okay, when it comes to folding the boom, this system has auto boom fold. And it's very important to keep your hand or your thumb pressing the button until you get the message on the display saying that the boom unfold is complete or the boom fold is complete. Because the booms may look like they're in position, but the system hasn't finished going through the steps that it needs to verify that the boom is correctly positioned. Okay, now we're going to go through some of the spray system information. To set your spray system up, again, this is an exact apply machine, but we're going to go to main menu, we're going to go to boom and nozzles. You'll see here, this is our exact apply configuration. Those dots there are representative of the turret on the exact apply nozzle. It's telling us which positions we're using and then also what tip we have associated with that. It's also showing us that we're in A and B mode. If we want to if we want to go in there and we want to do any adjustments, we just press on that, and that's going to bring up our exact apply configuration. Again, this is just a blown up picture of what I mentioned before. If we want to change the tips, we go into manual setup, and this is where we know what we've got on our turret. If we physically go back and turn that turret, then we need to turn that turret here so the system knows that we have those repositioned. In the center, you can see that we have A plus B mode selected. We can change that mode by pressing on it and selecting it here. Or on our keypad, we have A and B. If I change this to A only on the screen, you can see that it only illuminates the A button on the side. I can switch that over here, switch to B, and you'll see that it switches on the display as well. If you are in a single tip mode and you want to add the dual tip mode, you just press the button and hold it, the one that's not illuminated, and once you do that, it'll enter it into A+B mode again. Want to point out, on 2017 machines and older, they're not going to have these exact apply buttons on the armrest. You'll have to do that all through the 2630 or the display that you have in the machine. Have heard some feedback that the 2630 display isn't as user-friendly, isn't as desirable as the Gen 4 displays with exact apply. So keep that as a side note. Okay, a little bit more on exact apply setup. We're going to go into menu, then we're going to go into boom and nozzles again. Just wanted to point out that we do have target pressures. We have target pressure 1 and 2, which coincide with the target pressure buttons over here. We can set those to whatever we want based on the tips we're using. And again, in here, want to point out that we have a specific gravity setting. That's going to be whatever your carrier specific gravity is. So water's generally 1. I've heard that if you're spraying fertilizer, 28% is going to be 1.28, 32% is roughly 1.32. But I bring this up because if we're having trouble hitting rate or we're not coming out right on loads, we can take a look at that and do some research and make sure we have the right specific gravity entered for the system. Also want to touch on, I've seen this a couple of times this spring. We had a customer all set up and then he started having some trouble. He noticed his duty cycle graph on his main display page was just maxed out and his rate was out of control. Well, for pulsing mode, we want to be in auto. This is going to allow us to use turn compensation and have that PWM work on the nozzles. That had gotten somehow switched to off, and so it was just turning the system on and basically running speed and pressure. What had happened was whatever he did or whatever the system did to switch that to off, we could not get that to go back to auto. If that happens, if you just rotate this turret on the display 360 degrees, that will reset the ACD controller. For whatever reason, it just kind of refreshes the system and then it'll allow us to put this back into auto mode and we can go back to spraying. Also, want to show, if we go into the menu and then under machine settings, if we go down to our spray system, it's important to have your minimum pressure and your spray off pressure set at 15 and 40. If you need to change them, you can just press on it, enter the number that you want in there. But our minimum pressure is going to be 15 psi. That's what the system's going to maintain at all times. So think about it in the old conventional spraying. If we set this minimum spray pressure so when we slow down for ditches, we would keep that 15 psi so we didn't lose our spray pattern. And then our spray off pressure, we want that set at 40 because that's what our tips are designed to run at. That's where we're going to get the best pattern and get the approved flow through each tip. If we need to change our target rates, we can do that in here as well. Just press on that. You can select your rate, which coincides with our rate selection on the armrest. And then if we want to change, say, rate 1 to a different gallon per acre, we can do that by just pressing on that window. And again, you see if we're running a prescription, we would enter that in here much like we do on planters. One neat feature that I like about this system is we can select different agitation modes. So if we go to menu and then we go into our tank system, we see our tank system information here. We can turn on a low tank alarm. This one is on and set at 100 gallons, so it's going to give us a message when we get down to that 100 gallons left. And then also, specifically, I want to talk about the agitation. So if we go in there, we can turn auto agitation on, and what we can do is we can select a gallon amount that we want agitation to shut off at. So agitation is always going to be on until we get to 100 gallons left. And at that point, the system's going to know that we're just about out of product, so it's going to turn agitation off. Down here, we have 3 different levels of agitation. Basically, this is talking about how open we want that agitation valve, or how much solution we're running through agitation. The one on the left is going to be 30% open. The one in the middle is going to be 50% open. and then the one on the right is going to be 100% open. So meaning we're going to have 100% of that valve open and solution agitating as it's on.